it's a pleasure as always to be here with all of you. I was here last year. At that time, of course, there was some other news breaking as far as HUL was concerned, which was the Unilever buyback proposal. I'm afraid there is no such news today, so we can relax and talk about business as usual. What I'm going to do really is to set up pretty much the context of how Unilever is doing, and within that, the priorities that we see across the world, so that we can contextualize what we are doing in India. And then, of course, Sanjeev and his team will take you through more detail in terms of what our strategy is for our business in India and what some of our key pillars and thrusts are going forward. So with that, let me see if I can click this. No? Okay, here we go. Am I supposed to be pointing this somewhere? Pointing it here, there? I know. Thank you. Okay, so let's start first with Unilever and what we are doing in Unilever to where we've come from in the last 5 years. What are we doing in terms of stepping up the performance as we see the world around us change quite dramatically, actually? And importantly, how do we believe we can still continue to win in the developing and emerging markets? That, of course, is of more relevance to all of us in this room. So if you take a 5-year perspective, actually Unilever is pretty much of a different company. There is absolutely no doubt about it. In fact, the big thing that has changed is the consistent delivery of business results, particularly of our top-line growth. So if you can see in the last 4 years, we've gone from a 40 billion euro to a 50 billion euro, and in fact, in every one of the last 3 or 4 years, we've actually grown the business quite consistently. Last year was 4.3% against a backdrop of some really, really aggressive downturns in markets. The year before was 6.9% and so on, but it's been a very consistent performance. Coupled with that, we've also been able to really deliver a fairly continuous improvement in our core operating margin. And last year, that was 40 basis points of improvement on our operating margin. And equally, what we feel good about is that the reputation of Unilever as an employer of choice across the world has gone up very dramatically from an already great base. Out of the 34 countries in which we track Unilever's standing as an employer of choice, we are in 23 of them, in fact, number 1 in the FMCG sector, number 1 employer of choice. But the picture that you see here is even more interesting. Last year on LinkedIn, after Google and Apple, Unilever was the one that was the most clicked in terms of employment. So you can see here that we are certainly moving towards a situation where our business performance is more consistent, more competitive, more profitable, and importantly, we are also beginning to see ourselves move up as someone people want to work with. So that is, if you like, in a nutshell, the report card of Unilever in the last 5 years. Underlying this has been also a very consistent strategy and a vision. The vision of the business that we articulated in 2010 was really one of doubling our business and at the same time reducing our environmental impact and increasing our social impact. That continues to drive our business, and you'll see several examples both in my presentation and I'm sure in Sanjeev and his team's presentation about what we are doing to really make sustainable living commonplace and at the same time grow our business. Clear strategy. We have what we call a strategy on a page, which I'm sure all of you have seen many times, but essentially it talks about how the 4 pillars of how we are going to grow. Winning with brands and innovation, winning in the marketplace, winning with continuous improvement, and winning with people. Those are the 4 pillars, and against that we have got some very specific thrusts, and every year the emphasis changes, but what does not change is the strategic framework of the company. We want to double our business, at the same time reduce our environmental impact, and make sustainable living commonplace. And basically we want to drive this with these 4 big pillars that we drive across the business. So if you don't fit in any of these 4 pillars, frankly, you don't really have a role that you perform within Unilever. And I'm sure you'll see all these 4 pillars coming to life in a very exciting way in the context of Hindustan Unilever. And the difference between USLP, Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, and some of the others that you may have seen articulated, this is not just a CSR initiative. It is the way we run our business. So quite simply, when people run our factories, they always believe less is more. Less energy is better, less water is better. When people are procuring our raw materials, the starting point is, of course we've got to get the best rates for our raw materials, but we must make sure that they are sourced from sustainable sources. 100% of our palm oil is sourced from sustainable sources. 48% of all our agricultural products are sourced from sustainable sources. So this is the way we do business. And again, hopefully you will see several examples of how we do this. Some hard facts about how we've driven our business. By the way, HUL will be no different if you were to put it in the same context. In the last 5 years, we are perhaps the only company that has substantially raised the A&P, the advertising and promotion investment that we put behind our brands, or what we now call brand marketing investment. 2 billion extra has gone in, 2 billion euros by the way, between 2008 and 2013. We've also significantly reshaped the portfolio of Unilever in the last 5 years. More than 55% of the company's business now comes from 14 1 billion euro brands. Almost all of them are strong in India. Personal care, which is a big driver of not just growth, but margins, is now 36% of Unilever's total business and the fastest growing part of Unilever's business. Emerging markets, the other pillar of growth for Unilever globally, is 57% of Unilever's business and is without doubt, of course, the fastest and the most important part of our growth strategy. So that, again, in a nutshell, tells you how we are driving the business. Through brands, making our brands bigger, through innovation, personal care, which is the big driver of our global growth, emerging markets, and within which, of course, India, Brazil would count as very much the top 2 that we have. And then, supported by an organization and culture that is, our organization framework is getting tighter, so that there are fewer touch points, and the ability to connect markets with global functions, global categories, has been made even easier and more seamless. So we now have 4 category groupings: personal care, home care, refreshment, and foods. And then we've got 8 market clusters. One of them happens to be South Asia, where India has the lead. And these 8 clusters are all managed across one table, which I manage, called the Global Market Executive. And this is where the in-year P&L of the company resides. All the inputs are funneled through into this markets organization and then goes out into all the markets across the world through what we call the Global Market Executive, the GMEX, of which Sanjeev here is very much a part of the 8-member team. So that's actually now a 7-member team, 7 presidents of the markets. So that's the way we are organized. And that again gives you a sense of how we are investing, how we are reshaping our portfolio and what our portfolio priorities are, and how we are organizing for growth and agility. Of course, the critical thing is, what are we doing in the markets? Are we winning in the marketplace? And again, I've just taken just a couple of figures. The mantra in the markets is very simple: more stores, perfect stores, better served. And again, hopefully the impression we want to give you is that there is a clarity and simplicity of our agenda, but of course, under that is executional detail and rigor. So if you look at more stores, we've doubled the number of stores that are on our direct coverage globally, over 8 million. And a large part of this increase that you see from 4 million to 8 million has actually come from India. India has been one of the biggest drivers of this agenda, and particularly in rural India. And that, in fact, has given us the confidence that we have the plumbing and the wiring to be able to really drive growth into our markets for the next decade. Perfect stores. Not only is it important to cover these stores, to go there, but we've created a repeatable model with the use of technology, how we can actually not just supply products to our retailers, but to market our brands to shoppers. That's the big change. We are not in the business of just supplying products to retailers. We are in the business of marketing our brands to shoppers. Meaning, how do we make sure that when someone walks into a store, whether it's a Kirana shop or a big supermarket, are our brands able to communicate to shoppers? So that is really our repeatable model. And we now have 7 million of these over 8 million stores that are enrolled with perfect stores. What that means is that we have data banks now that allow us to monitor and track on a regular basis whether our product is rightly positioned there, whether our shelf is right, whether we are communicating on the shelf, and whether our promotional program is actually being implemented in these stores. And this information in India, for example, someone like Manish Tiwari, who's our head of CD, our customer development head, will actually have available to him and his team on real-time basis. And then, of course, it's not just important to have perfect stores, it's equally important to make sure that we are servicing them. And OSA is nothing but on-shelf availability. And our on-shelf availability has gone up by 900 basis points over the period of the last 5 years. So this is really what we are doing in the marketplace. I always say we are in a simple business of selling soap and soup. But the thing is, we have to make sure that we are able to execute our strategy every day, everywhere, in every store. And this is what more stores, perfect stores, better served is defined as. I spoke about Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, the fact that it is driving growth. One of our fastest growing brands across the world is Lifebuoy. One of our fastest growing brands. Doubled in the last so many years, few years actually. And the reason why it is our fastest growing brand, because it is also the brand that communicates our USLP the best. The whole idea of saying we are here to protect lives is really what Lifebuoy is about. It's a brand that stands for hygiene. It stands for protecting lives. And that is really what has given this brand a purpose which is much larger than just a bar of soap that you can use for washing hands or washing or bathing. I spoke about less is more. Reducing waste and cost is very much part of the agenda. We've saved over 350 million euros in terms of cost avoidance in our factories in the last 5 years. And lastly, and very importantly, we live in a world of scarce resources. And I mentioned this to you, 48% of all our raw materials are now sourced from sustainable sources, including, by the way, 80% of the tomatoes that we source for Kisan in India come from small farmers and are sourced from sustainable sources. So that kind of gives you a sense of how we are bringing USLP into life as an integral part of running our business. So that, I hope, has given you a little bit of a sense of where we are in Unilever. Number one, a more consistent performance, both in terms of top line and a more competitive performance versus the market, a more profitable performance as we've gone over the last few years, and importantly, all of this bundled with a business model that's about USLP, or really growing our business and at the same time caring for the environment in which we operate. And I've also spoken to you about the few drivers of this growth. It's really been all about making sure that we are able to drive innovation through our business and at the same time drive execution and brand support so that we can really make bigger and better brands. But having said that, I don't need to tell all of you, the world has changed in the last 3 years. Markets have slowed down, both in the developed world, which was always having, if you like, issues post the financial crisis, and more recently, in the last year and a half, we've seen a slowdown in the developing world. And the question, therefore, is, in a situation where market growth is slowing down, what is it that we want to do to keep our performance still at what I call the 4G level? Growth that is consistent, growth that is profitable, growth that is competitive, and growth that is responsible. That doesn't change for us. So let's have a look at what we are doing. And there are really 4 things that we are focusing on. One is innovation, innovation, innovation. Second is new growth opportunities. Third is simplification and agility. In a world which is volatile and dynamic, how do we move fast and take actions in the marketplace which we may not even have foreseen or planned for? And lastly, we absolutely need more fuel for growth, because markets are not only slowing down, they're also getting more competitive. So let's have a look at each of these. Innovation, bigger, better, faster innovations. How do we really make sure that we are not just doing hundreds of activities, but we are doing bigger and better and faster activities? And you will see a lot of examples of that in HUL. But here are just some examples of what we have done globally. So just to give you an example, just 5 years ago, we used to have less than 10 projects that used to go global in more than 10 markets. Now we have between 70 and 80 projects that are going into 10 plus countries. And projects like the Axe Apollo variant that we launched last year went into 60 plus markets at the same time. On Lipton, a yellow label relaunch, it went globally in a matter of 18 months. Our liquid concentrated detergent liquids went global with one of the best technologies in almost all our lead markets very, very rapidly. And Rama is our margarine example, where we are trying to really create a combination of butter and margarine to combine the best of both worlds, and that's being rolled out. And these are just some examples, underpinned by some big investments in terms of R&D and technologies. The Lifebuoy technology, which is patented, which gives you faster germ kill than any other product in the marketplace, and this is completely patented, and we are leveraging this now across the world. In tea, we have developed a technology, in fact in our laboratories in Bangalore, where we were there last week, which allows us to fortify tea with the natural essence of liquid tea, and therefore gives you an even more robust natural flavor of tea. And this is again being used across the world. And these are just a couple of examples. But plenty of breakthrough technologies are coming through in areas which are core to us, so we can create better products. And along with that, we are also innovating in technologies that allow us to communicate better with consumers. And just 2 examples, and you're going to hear and see a lot about that. Our Dove campaign, digital campaign last year, Sketches, actually was the most watched digital campaign in advertising history. And you will see that in terms of how we created to build Dove as a brand that is all about a campaign for real beauty and women's self-empowerment. Equally exciting, and I think is perhaps one of the most exciting things that have been created by Hindustan Unilever, is the Kan Khajura Tation, which was a unique, absolutely unique innovation for us to reach into media dark areas. I don't want to steal the thunder. It, by the way, won 3 Kans golds, and you'll hear a lot more about it. And here is the right word. So remember this, Kan Khajura Tation. Okay? So that was the first bit, innovation. The second bit is new growth opportunities. There are still huge amount of opportunities in the world where we can grow our business. And there are huge opportunities within our developing world. I mean, just let me name two. Take Africa and Myanmar as two examples. Africa, where, by the way, we have more operating companies on the ground in 12 countries for the last 100 years. We've operated in, places like Kenya for 100 years, Nigeria for 80 years, Ghana for 60 years. Our per capita turnover in sub-Saharan Africa is €1. Our per capita turnover in all of the emerging markets is, I think, if you calculate 57% of our turnover divided by the population, is probably around €6. And then there are countries like Brazil, where it is 20 plus. Countries like Africa, where it is even higher. So from €1 per capita, we believe that we can go 4, 5 times. It's a matter of just time. Number two, Myanmar, 60 million population, a market that we were the first to get in the 20s. We were the first to get out when they had human rights issues. We are back again in Myanmar, and I can tell you, huge potential to actually build a big business. And I'm going to come back to opportunities within India in terms of actually growing geographically. Channels. We are underweighted in some of the channels across the world. If you take, for example, the drug channel, we are underweighted. Our share in drug channel is less than our share in other channels. So getting our fair share in drug is a huge opportunity. Number two, out of home. As we move into, as people start getting more discretionary income, they're consuming more and more out of home. Ice cream, tea, these are things people are consuming more and more out of home. Eating more outside. How do we really tap this opportunity of out of home? And lastly, and very self-evidently, is about e-commerce. E-commerce is the fastest growing channel in the world now. And we know that digital is changing the way, not only the way we communicate to our consumers, but the way shoppers shop. And how do we connect, if you like, the like button to the buy button? And we've got now a dedicated global team working with our markets to be able to create the platforms and make sure we get our fair share in the digital channel. India is no different. I mean, you know the success of Flipkart, for example. So again, we believe we need to build the capabilities around e-commerce. So those are some opportunities of channels. And lastly, and very importantly, in spite of all the economic stress, the fastest growing part of the personal care market is still, I'm talking globally by the way, is still the premium end. And there, these are just one example of what we are doing. Ioma is a prestige brand, skincare brand that we bought, is a Paris-based brand that we are now extending into some of our key markets. And then, even in food, it's the premium end of the market that is really growing. And we've got a mustard brand from France called Maille. And this is again something that we are rolling it out. If you happen to be in London, we've just opened up a Maille shop in Regent Street, okay? And Ioma, for example, is also present in Harrods and a couple of the lead outlets. So basically, premiumization is a place, once again, where Unilever has been somewhat underweighted. We've just launched, as I speak to you, an oral care brand, a premium oral care brand that actually regenerates the enamel on your teeth. The brand is called Regenerate, just been launched last week in Selfridges, and gives you an idea. This is not about Ioma and Maille, but we are looking at opportunities for premium and brands across our key categories. The other initiative, of course, is simplifying our organization so we can move with even more speed. So there's a whole program called Project Half, which is all about ensuring that we speed up the process from idea to marketplace. We are looking at how do we make sure that order-to-cash processes are being simplified. SKUs are being reduced. We intend reducing about 30% of our SKUs by the end of this year, so that once again you create the space to grow the business and to simplify it. Marketing Fit to Win is an initiative which allows us to deduplicate the organization so that different parts of our organization from sales, marketing, product development can interface without everyone trying to do everything. And lastly, and very importantly, what is the point being a 50 billion euro business if we cannot leverage the scale of Unilever in every single market? We were, in fact, I told you last week in Bangalore, visited our R&D facilities, but we also went to our enterprise and technology support center, actually Enterprise and Technology Solutions Center, ETS. And if any of you are there, we'll be quite happy to host you so you can see how this is becoming the hub of all our shared services and technology support across the world. So those are some examples of how we are stepping up simplification, agility, and speed. All this is not just about becoming agile, it's also making sure that we can save some costs. Our track record has been, in the last few years, that we've managed to save about €1 billion plus every year through our supply chain savings, our low-cost business models, overhead savings, and so on. With some of these projects coming in now, we are hoping to step up on that savings and take it beyond that. And we believe that we've got a potential of generating another 500 million of savings between 2014 and 15. So that kind of gives you an idea of how we are sort of simplifying our organization. We're also simplifying, by the way, our portfolio. This continues to be an ongoing process. We are acquiring businesses, and we are also at the same time disposing things that are not working for us. Something that is not here on this table, we acquired a business recently in China, a water business called Qinyuan. And by the way, it's growing at 40 to 50%. Okay? And now tells you how serious we're getting about water. So we have Pureit here, and we bought the water company, which is perhaps one of the leading companies in China on water, with some fantastic technologies. So with Pureit and Qinyuan now, we're going to combine it to make our water business even more robust. And then some of these things you already know about, we've spoken about too. T2 is a premium tea business out of home in Australia. So again, there is a theme here on premiumization, out of home, that we wish to really make sure that we are there in a bigger way. Okay, so that was pretty much Unilever stepping up our performance in terms of innovation, stepping up our performance in terms of simplification, and so on. And hopefully you get some idea that it's not business as usual. And now let me come to developing and emerging markets. And I think the big question that is in everyone's mind is the developing and emerging market opportunity still intact? So let me give you the answer first and not wait in suspense. The answer is yes. The question is why? Why do we still believe that, and why do we feel so confident that this has to be the big opportunity for the next 10 to 20 years? Well, first, and quite simply, this is that little small circle that you see there. There are more people living inside that circle than the rest of the world. And thankfully, in that circle is a country called India. Okay? If you take India, China, and Southeast Asia, there are more people living in Asia and this part of Asia than there are in the rest of the world. In other words, 85% of the world lives in developing markets. Okay? This is where bulk of global growth is going to come from on a longer term basis. And there is no doubt that this is where the future of consumer goods businesses will be made or defined. And we are fortunate. What hasn't changed are two things. I want to start from the bottom. That we have delivered over 20 years an underlying average sales growth of 9% per annum in these markets. Okay? It's really, really important to understand that it is over 20 years of track record. And number two, a large part of our business in the categories in which we operate in these markets comes from number one and number two positions. In fact, a bulk of our turnover comes from number one leading positions in the leading markets. And these are just some examples of where we are number one and two. Don't get too worried if there is a blank. It doesn't mean we don't operate necessarily. It just means we may not be number one or two. But we believe, the emerging market company with bar none. And this is what gives us the confidence that going forward, there is plenty to do. 1.3 billion new consumers are going to be entering the consumer market across the world. A lot of them, in fact, almost all of them, are going to be in the developing markets. Rapid urbanization, and we've just taken two markets, India and China, and you can see that's going to create the next groundswell of growth. I believe that 34% of urban population by 2020 may be a gross underestimate, because India may reach a point of inflection more quickly and get into a more rapid urbanization, and that creates growth. So that's the reason why we have the confidence to grow this business. Per capita consumptions still remain very low. Just two examples. Per capita consumption in Indonesia, one of our fastest growing ice cream markets, is still 15 times lower than Russia and other developing markets. Forget about Russia. Take something closer home. Thailand and Indonesia and body lotions. Our per capita consumption in body lotions is 1/13 of Thailand. That's the opportunity. And you can see this is not going to go away. It may take a year more, it may take a year less, but it's not going to go away. And there is huge amount of white space where Unilever brands have not even entered. This is a simple graph. It tells you on the x-axis the brands that we have, and on the y-axis percentage of countries in which we are represented by those brands. And you can see that more than 50% of that space of our brand country combinations is still white space. Okay? So long way to go. Give you one example. Tresemme, India, was a white space cell till last year. Now it is not a white space cell. And Tresemme, by the way, doing is exceedingly well. So that gives you a sense of how we are looking at opportunities. I talked about white space in terms of geography. This is the best example I have got, which is 20 years ago, we had no business in Vietnam. It was a white space. Today, we have a business there which is over €500 million. Ethiopia has exactly the same demographics as Vietnam. 90 million population, same GDP, same situation. We have zero sales in Ethiopia. We have some exports, but we don't have an operation on the ground. Just started that operation. And what do you think we can be in 20 years? I don't have to guess. It'll be at least 600 million euros, which is $1 billion. That's the opportunity. And coming closer home, India is a continent. There are many Indias. Take rural as an opportunity. If you look at rural versus urban comparison, the per capita turnover, consumption of Unilever categories, this is not our sales, this is consumption, Nielsen data. Per capita consumption in rural areas is €4. It is 15 euros in urban. There is a four-fold opportunity in rural. Four-fold opportunities in rural in our categories. Question is, will it take 5 years, 7 years, 8 years? I can tell you, we're not going away anywhere. And our strategy is to make the effort as if this can happen tomorrow or day after. Take different states of India, huge opportunity. And we've just taken one set. If you take a cut of some central India states, 40% of India's population, but only 20% of the GDP. Huge opportunity. So the opportunity of white space is not restricted to only new countries, but to my mind, the best concept ever invented is segmentation and fair share. If you take any market and segment it, you will find opportunities to be able to grow the business. And we have a very consistent strategy. If you haven't heard our strategy before for developing markets, then you haven't been coming for our investor meets. Nothing has changed here. It's about deepening distribution reach. It's about straddling the pyramid with a portfolio of our brands. And it is about ensuring that we bring Unilever's global leverage, but make sure it is relevant locally. So that's the three pillars of our strategy in developing markets. Deepen our distribution reach, straddle the pyramid, and global leverage with local relevance. We have platforms globally, and we want to leverage it across the world, but not mindlessly. Make sure they are relevant locally. So here is a Knorr example. We are big on chicken cubes in Nigeria. In Vietnam, we've launched a fortified version of that. And in China, it's a jelly version of the bouillon cube. And in India, we've launched recently instant soups. So, you know, these are all examples of how we can take one platform and extend it. So, hopefully, I think you are convinced, if you needed any convincing, that the emerging market opportunity is intact, and more importantly, HUL particularly and Unilever generally, we believe is well poised to take this on. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sanjeev. Thank you.